This is CNN.
From CNN in Hong Kong, I'm Andrew Stevens.
And I'm Christy Lou Stout. You're watching CNN Today.
First, let's take a look at some of the top stories we are following. The jury in the Michael Jackson trial found the entertainer not guilty on all 10 felony counts in his child molestation trial. It was a complete vindication for Jackson, who has maintained his innocence from the time the charges were filed. 5 African leaders have told US President George W. Bush that his major aid programs are too slow in getting help to countries that need it. Mr. Bush has promised to, quote, work harder and faster, unquote, to speed up aid to the region. 14 people, including members of the security forces, have been killed by a car bomb in the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir. The blast went off near a school and at least 2 students are among the dead. No one has claimed responsibility for the explosion. The Iraqi tribunal planning the trial of Saddam Hussein released video of him being interrogated on Sunday. The tape does not contain audio. The tribunal says the questioning pertained to one of several cases expected to be used in charging the ousted Iraqi president with war crimes and crimes against humanity.
And returning to our top story, pop star Michael Jackson has been acquitted. The jury in his Santa Maria, California child molestation trial returned not guilty verdicts on all 10 felony counts. Peter Viles takes a look back at the trial.
Which image will you remember? Maybe Michael Jackson jumping on the roof of his SUV to salute his fans? Maybe the day he showed up in his pajamas so late for court he almost got arrested? Or the parade of celebrities to the Santa Maria courthouse? Jay Leno, Macaulay Culkin, Larry King. The circus atmosphere at times almost overshadowed the seriousness of the charges against him.
Violation of the California Penal Code, commonly known as child molestation.
The state alleges that over several weeks in 2003 at his Neverland Ranch, Jackson molested a 13-year-old boy after plying him with alcohol. In all, Jackson faces 10 felony charges, 4 counts of molestation, 1 count of attempted molestation, 4 counts related to alcohol, and a conspiracy charge that Jackson conspired to hold the boy and his family captive inside Neverland. Over time, Jackson did switch lawyers, but not defenses.
Michael Jackson is unequivocally and absolutely innocent of these charges.
The accuser's younger brother testified he saw Jackson groping his brother while the boy was asleep. Then the alleged victim, now 15, testified facing down the pop star and telling the jury Jackson sexually abused him on several occasions.
It was a little bit of a stare down going on between the boy and Michael Jackson during the testimony, whereas at times before that, the boy would talk to the jury. If you notice, when he was talking about that molestation, and especially on cross-examination, he was looking at Michael Jackson.
Another prosecution witness testified he saw Jackson perform oral sex on another boy, and yet another witness testified he had been fondled by Jackson as a boy.
He broke down. He said, "This is very hard for me. It's taken a lot of counseling." He was very believable, and he was dynamite for the prosecution.
The Jackson defense was really an attack, painting the accuser and his family as manipulative scam artists. The key confrontation, Thomas Mesro's cross-examination of the alleged victim's mother.
She really backfired for prosecutors. She was very brassy on the stand. She was argumentative, and also she reeked of insincerity. You just didn't believe her story. She was too ham-boned. She turned and addressed the jurors very dramatically every time she answered a question. She argued with the lead defense attorney, Tom Mesro. She just imploded on the stand.
Called by the prosecution, Jackson's ex-wife, Debbie Rowe, seemed to help the defense. She called Jackson a wonderful father who was manipulated by, quote, vultures around him. Defense witness Macaulay Culkin portrayed Jackson as harmless, saying he did sleep in Jackson's bed but was never molested. Jackson never testified, so he was never cross-examined, but jurors did hear from him through videotapes played for the jury, in which Jackson declared what he called his pure love for children. Peter Viles for CNN, Los Angeles.
Well, we're going to talk now more about the Michael Jackson trial and the verdict with Kendall Coffey. He's a former United States attorney and he joins us now from Miami. Kendall, thanks very much for joining us. There was a lot of comment at the weekend saying that the case going into its second week was going to be bad news for Michael Jackson. The longer it went, the worse the prospects were for Michael Jackson. Are you surprised by the verdict at all?
Well, longer deliberations are actually usually good for defense. Surprised about the verdict? In the sense that the prosecution threw so much at Michael Jackson and plenty of mud, seemed like he was going to get convicted of something. But it's not an upsetting verdict because when you get right down to it, as the defense pointed out with just about every prosecution witness, there were plenty of questions about the prosecution's case. And the jury followed the instructions faithfully, found a reasonable doubt. Doesn't mean they were sure if Michael Jackson's a blameless guy, but they were sure about one thing. There was at least a reasonable doubt as to whether he was guilty of the crimes he was being charged with.
Just on that point about the defence going for the prosecution witnesses, did you sense during the trial that the defence was on the right strategy, which was all about the real credibility of a lineup of people sort of testifying against Jackson?
Totally. They had a clear theme from day one. They weren't just kind of picking holes in this prosecution witness or that witness. They focused in like a heat-seeking missile on the accuser's family, saying that the mom was a scheming, scamming manipulator who put her kids up to a pack of lie in order to turn Michael Jackson into a gigantic ATM machine for millions of dollars. And that kind of theme obviously worked, and more importantly, it was supported by a lot of the facts, including past lawsuits that she'd been involved with, and by the way, including some clear-cut evidence that the mom and some other family members had lied multiple times in the past.
I want to ask you about the prosecutor, Tom Sneddon. He's been after, really, Michael Jackson for more than 10 years now. Do you think this finally draws a line under Michael Jackson? Do you think that Tom Sneddon now will let it go at this, or do you think there's a chance still for more action in the future?
Well, I wouldn't rule out what could happen in the future. The only thing I'm sure of is just as Michael Jackson wrote a song about this prosecutor's alleged vindictiveness in the past, I bet some future album of Michael Jackson's going to have another song about this prosecutor.
Okay, well, the whole process, I mean, again, described as a circus going on, certainly looked like a circus outside the courtroom. But inside the courtroom, Kendall, the judge ran a fairly tight ship. You think everything was conducted as it should have been?
Absolutely. This judge was in control of the trial from day one, and that contributed, I think, to the jury's conscientiousness. When the judge is totally in charge and then instructs them in considerable detail about everything from what kind of weight do you give to allegations of the past and what is the importance of reasonable doubt, you've got a judge whose instructions are going to be very carefully listened to and fully honored by the jury. And I think that had a lot to do with the result that was rendered today.
How pivotal do you think the testimony of Debbie Rowe, the former wife of Michael Jackson, was?
Well, I think that could have been one of the turning points in the case, not just because it exploded in the face of the prosecution with a kind of credibility harm that very easily could have carried over to others, but she also defined Michael Jackson. She talked about him in glowing terms as a good and loving father. She also talked about the vultures around him. And that, I think, was essential to explaining a lot of the very strange and troubling dynamics that surrounded Michael Jackson. Along the same line, I think the prosecution made a huge mistake trying to say that Macaulay Culkin was a victim of molestation. He too got on the stand. He too defined Michael Jackson as well as this dynamic of vultures around him. And I think those were the kind of mistakes that the prosecution made that in no small way contributed to Michael Jackson being acquitted today.
CNN legal analyst Kendall Coffey, thanks very much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Andrew.